politicize the issue of opioids. Instead, we want to know the candidate's position on how they can better address the opioid epidemic. So I will be moderating the forum and will make this announcement. Again, I would like to thank both candidates, District Attorney Christine Holman as well as Attorney Michael Pate, for participating in tonight's forum. Usually candidates take a for or against approach to specific policies. No one is for heroin or abusive opiate use. This epidemic has hit people from all political parties, race, gender, and socioeconomic levels. However, the voters want to know what each candidate may do if they are elected to the district attorney's office on how to better combat the opiate heroin problem in the future. And again, members of Step Up Tamaqua Executive Committee have submitted tonight's questions. I know a few of them are here. If you want to stand up, I know George and Kathy are here. I don't know if anybody else. They're a little shy, so maybe they won't do that. But again, thank you for submitting the questions. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement. Then each candidate has 2 minutes to answer each question. So I will ask each candidate the same question. Then they will have up to a minute if they would like to rebut that answer from their opponent. And at the end, each candidate will have a 2-minute closing statement. Okay? So District Attorney Holman, you have the first 2 minutes to make an opening statement. Thank you.
Sure. When I graduated from North Schuylkill in 1980, I didn't think that I'd be sitting here addressing all of you, so I'm honored. Thank you. About 1 week ago, President Donald Trump declared the opioid crisis a national public health emergency. Yes, this is the most widespread and deadly drug crisis in America. The medical profession has engaged fully by monitoring addictive opiates they prescribe. The pharmaceutical companies, well, they need to engage, and that's for a whole other day. Law enforcement has engaged fully. Right here in Schuylkill County, we are dealing with arresting drug dealers and users in record volumes. Senator Dave Arville has engaged fully. He and I hosted the opiate epidemic, a youth education and awareness roundtable back in December of 2016. Certain panel members that were there, Barry Denk, Director, Center for Rural Development. John Gamble was Program Director of Gadenzia. Michael Pennington, Director of the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquent and Profession. I have had multiple conversations with Mike Harrell of Gadenzia. Dr. Moylan, our current county coroner, has fully engaged, and we have discussed the formation of a prevention task force. Catherine Shuck and also John Micah have agreed to join. In August of this year, I produced and disseminated a letter to all Schuylkill County educators, EMS personnel, and municipal community leaders, informing all that I embarked on a prevention strategy. Its basic formula, the acronym ACE, A for accountability, measuring and reporting, which would be treatment. C for increasing the availability of services, again, increasing treatment. E for effectiveness, improving the quality of services and involving families. In the letter, I posed a question, what can we do? Everyone is engaging. You too can engage. You can do by focusing on major concepts sometimes taken for granted. And I apologize, I'll finish. Love, trust, honesty, and communication with your children. And parents, remember this. It's not pestering, it is parenting when you are asking your children to confide in you and communicate with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Since that was about 2 minutes, 30 seconds, I'll give you the extra 30 seconds, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending tonight's town hall meeting on the opioid crisis facing all of our communities. I I would first like to take this opportunity to thank Todd Zimmerman and Step Up Tamaqua for coordinating this program this evening, and a special thank you to the North Schuylkill School District for hosting the program as well. A 16th century philosopher once observed that on many occasions, the remedy is worse than the disease. And when you think about that, and when you think about what Mr. Snyder talked about here tonight, that comes into play when you're talking about the opioid crisis. In many instances, as Jason indicated, a lot of the opioid problem starts when someone is prescribed medication for pain relief or other ailments. And that cure that they supposedly receive, unfortunately, sometimes turns into an addictive problem. So I want to talk to you this evening about how I intend to lessen the impact of opioid addiction in Schuylkill County. First, I would educate the children. That's one of the things that needs to be done at an early intervention stage. I would go to every elementary school, middle school, and high school and teach the children about the dangers of drugs. Before I do that, I would set up a summit with the superintendents, the administrators, drug and alcohol counselors throughout Schuylkill County, law enforcement personnel, and physicians. And we would come up with a unified strategy to teach these children about the dangers of drugs. So education is the first prong of my attack. Secondly, rehabilitation is necessary in addressing this problem. Unfortunately, again, it is a disease, it's an addiction that cannot be helped. Some people need help through the process, and rehabilitation is the key to that process. Schuylkill County, through the efforts of Judge Goodman and the Adult Probation Department, started the Schuylkill County Drug Court Program. It's a 14-month program wherein anyone involved in that program must complete certain steps. Those steps include going to counseling, going to treatment, getting a job, things of that nature. If they don't complete the program, then they are looking at incarceration, and that is the third prong of my program. We will give you an opportunity to help yourself. If you do not avail yourself of that opportunity, there will be stiff and severe punishment for those individuals.
Thank you. Okay, the first question is going to go to Mr. Pink. Is there music playing somewhere? Thank you. Sorry about that. First question. Blaming and finger pointing only serves to fuel the status quo. Now more than ever, we need to bring all the community stakeholders together so that a productive conversation on setting our course towards a comprehensive alcohol, tobacco, and other drug abuse plan can be developed here in Schuylkill County. What are some key points that you have learned from this opioid epidemic, and what would you do if elected to help tackle this issue? Mr. O'Pay.
Well, as I indicated as part of my opening, the opioid problem is an addiction, it's a disease, and people need to have a course that they can follow in order to beat that addiction and in order to overcome that disease. So, as part of what I would do, I again create a summit. And I would get together superintendents from the schools, leaders throughout the community, former drug addicts like Mr. Snyder that would come, and we would develop a course or a plan of attack along the way. As I indicated, I would go into the elementary schools, the middle schools. If you wait till high school, it's unfortunately too late. So that course that we would develop at this summit would be the guideline that we would use to help people overcome their addiction. As Jason indicated, part of the process is prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery. And all of those things can be talked about during the summit, and once that summit is developed, then we would go forward from there.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Holman, you want me to read the question again?
No, I think I have it. Thank you, Todd. My plan would be a treatment task force, a task force that I've already looked into as far as various professionals in the area. Really the same concept, educating the young children, middle school, high school, bringing a task force together such as Dr. Moylan, the coroner, perhaps a prescribing doctor, some pharmacists, commissioners from our county, individuals that can make decisions. Pastor Vinny would be a great one to have on the task force. We need housing. We do need more treatment centers, and certainly I think Koji would be a great resource to have on this task force. So call it a summit, call it a task force, call it what you want. But the goal would be that early intervention, teaching children the effects of heroin, what addiction does to families, how it tears families apart, and how achieved a $550,000 grant that we will be able to open the program again. We had to close the program to applicants because we were just a little bit overtaxed. And that program is certainly a significant asset for Schuylkill County to have.
Okay, thank you. Second question, and this is for Mrs. Holman. What experience, skills, or special abilities do you bring as a candidate for public office that lends itself to the hard work that is coalition or partnership building?
And are you speaking with regard to the opiate and heroin
Or
crisis?
anything in general that you've participated in the past, for partnership building, coalition building?
Certainly. I can point directly to the drug treatment court. For probably 2 years prior to the drug treatment court beginning, myself and some others had gone to various counties to observe how these drug treatment courts worked. We were able to see firsthand who the participants were, what each participant's role was. We actually sat in on a court proceeding in Columbia County and watched an actual drug court in action. Myself and some of the other members put the manual together. We each had a part in putting these manuals together. The district attorney has a role, public defender has a role, the drug and alcohol individuals have a role, adult probation has a role. Each one of us has had to review the pieces of this manual. We now have a manual, we have a up and running drug court. In January of 2017, I did a forum for a law symposium, and I brought in the president of the District Attorneys Association, who had been assigned to be the drug court president, so to speak. And he was able to offer some advice to law enforcement and attorneys in how to deal with drug court. It's not really, it's not that much different than dealing with prosecution, but what you're doing is you're having a prosecutor have to kind of utilize a different mindset. Instead of looking at, okay, we have a criminal complaint here, you're charged with PWID, you're charged with possession, here's your plea offer, we're going to give you an opportunity to enter into the drug court and then monitor it.
Thank you. Attorney O'Pake, what experience, skills, or special abilities do you bring as a candidate for public office that lends itself to the hard work that is coalition or partnership building?
Well, I think some of the special skills that I bring to the table from the District Attorney's Office is that I was a prosecutor in the District Attorney's Office for 22 years as an Assistant District Attorney. During that period of time, I was able to gain the trust, respect, and confidence of local and state police to the point that I've received the endorsement of the State Police Lodge number 65 and the North Schuylkill Lodge 25.
Sorry. Okay.
Lonnie, was that you? I've also been endorsed by the North Schuylkill Lodge, the North Schuylkill FOP Lodge 25, and those endorsements were given to me specifically because of my relationship with these officers and able to build a coalition and a partnership with these officers to the point that that's what needs to be done when you're attacking a problem. The district attorney can't be expected to solve this problem by himself or herself. The only way this problem is going to get solved is through a coalition of efforts. When we use that term coalition of efforts, it takes into account many people, many individuals that are involved throughout many different areas of business, be it community leaders, state police, whatever it may be. I believe that I have that skill and that ability to bring that coalition together to lessen the impact of opiates in Schuylkill County.
Thank you. Directed towards yourself. People have described marijuana as a gateway drug. What are your feelings on that statement? And do you believe marijuana or legal opioids such as oxycodone is more of a gateway drug for heroin?
Can you just repeat the last part of that question about the oxy?
Sure. Do you believe that marijuana or legal opioids such as oxycodone is more of a gateway drug for heroin? Which one do you believe is more of a gateway drug? Marijuana or legal opioids?
I believe legal opioids, I believe, would be more of a gateway drug than the marijuana. Unfortunately, as Jason again indicated, and Jason made tonight's presentation and tonight's program real for everyone here. If anyone believes that the opioid problem doesn't exist in Schuylkill County, they're wrong. If anybody believes that the opioid problem doesn't exist throughout the nation, they're wrong. And what Jason said tonight should bring that home for everyone. It can happen to anyone at any point in time. With regard, and he indicated that he grew up in a rural area, and he and his brothers used alcohol. They used marijuana at the time because that was a rite of passage, he called it. However, when you're talking about doing things of that nature and using marijuana, that obviously can become a gateway to the illegal narcotics, where you're scrounging around on the street and trying to get heroin and things of that nature. However, the legal OxyContin that's being prescribed, unfortunately, as I indicated earlier, sometimes the remedy is worse than the disease, and that's what part of the summit will address. We've got to make sure that these medications are not being overprescribed. We've got to make sure that what your illness is taken care of. As one of the things indicated by Jason was, there are certain guidelines. Someone that is going through a major operation should not be prescribed the same amount of oxy as someone that has a tooth extracted. So I believe that the legal prescription drugs, oxy, are more of a gateway drug than marijuana.
Thank you. Mrs. Holman?
I would agree in part, but I would also say that I believe marijuana is also a gateway drug. I think probably most people who abuse prescription opiates are going to be using heroin. The more a person abuses prescription opiates, the more likely it is that they will use heroin. Probably the more likely that someone is to use marijuana will wind up using some other type of drug. So, I mean, both are dangers, and I understand there's a component to marijuana for medical purposes. That's fine if it's monitored, but otherwise, it's a free-for-all. And both of these gateway drugs, certainly we will see a spike in crime. We will see a spike in potentially unemployment, because people who are addicted to drugs are less likely to be able to get up and go to work in the morning. So I believe both of these drugs are potentially gateway drugs.
Thank you. Attorney Holman, as DA, what do you say to a family who just lost a child because of a drug overdose?
I've had to have that conversation with several. And what I have said to them first, Todd, is I'm extremely sorry for your loss. I cannot put myself into your shoes, but certainly if I were able to think about the loss of my own child to a drug addiction, I know I would be feeling empty and hollow. So I am patient with those individuals. Sometimes those individuals have perhaps certain demands or requests that the district attorney's office is unable to meet. We have a victim advocate office where they can talk with someone there. Certainly I would recommend to those families, which I have, that they engage in perhaps some kind of grief counseling, and that they love one another and they talk. And certainly my door is always open. Now, if there is litigation or prosecution that is going to be pending, then that's something that we want to avoid. But certainly, all families in Schuylkill County have my sympathies if they have suffered the loss of a loved one. I know when Jason was up there, he was mentioning the amount.
Do you want to stop for a second? We're going to, I think, switch microphones here for you. Sorry.
Okay, when Jason was up here, he was mentioning the amount of deaths in Pennsylvania. And actually in 2016, Schuylkill County had 77 individuals die as a result of drug overdoses. Currently in 2017, we are under 30 right now. It's something I'm glad that I didn't have to experience, but again, my sympathies to those that have, and I can honestly tell them that, you know, the district attorney's office, through its detectives and work with law enforcement, are working every day to get to the source of the drugs that are coming into Schuylkill County, and we will certainly prosecute to the fullest extent. We will be looking at the law that has a component where if someone dies as a result of a drug delivery, they will be punished in a harsh fashion.
Thank you. Mr. Opeka, DA, what do you say to a family, or what would you say to a family who just lost a child because of a drug overdose?
Well, obviously, there are no words can fully express to a family that lost a child in any way, shape, or form, whether it be from a drug overdose or a car accident or whatever it may be. However, the first thing that I would do is express severe sympathy, tell that parent that I cannot put myself into his or her shoes, and that if someone tries to tell them how they feel or how they should feel, then that person is wrong, because every parent is going to experience the loss of a child in a different manner. Obviously, there's going to be a great deal of grief. There's going to be a great deal of despair. There's going to be a great deal of not wanting to go on in your own life, but I would be there to comfort and to care for any parent that would be in that situation. Unfortunately, recently I was advised by a parent that did lose a child, and he brought his concerns to District Attorney Holman. They engaged in an argument, and this person lost their daughter to a drug-related overdose. And instead of comforting and working with that father, Attorney Holman used expletives with that parent, and eventually sent the detectives from her office to his house to have him arrested. So for Attorney Holman to say that she would be sympathetic, there's an instance where she wasn't, and that happened very recently.
Would you like to respond?
Yes, and I feel sorry for Attorney Opaque for utilizing that version. That is mistaken, very much mistaken. The family member who lost a daughter had been contacting the district attorney's office multiple times, demanding things be done. In fact, demanding that an individual be charged with the death of his daughter. And really, I'm sorry that Mr. Opaque had to bring this up, because now I have to address it. And I know that family is in the room, and it's shameful. The individual that wanted, the family had wanted one individual charged. That individual was not the individual that has been charged now. There are 3 people that are being charged. The father of this daughter had engaged in a series of phone calls to various staff members in the district attorney's office. And for Mr. Opaque to sit here and say that I used expletives with this individual, I'm shocked. I had taken a very soft approach and had asked 2 detectives to go to this individual's home to let that individual know that he cannot continue to harass and demand things happen in the district attorney's office. And those 2 detectives, Detective Clark and Detective Heckman, if they were here today, they would certainly confirm that. And what they had told this individual was simply this, that he needs to take a couple of steps back, calm down, that the police will be investigating this death. Tamaqua police were investigating at that time. They did not go to this residence to arrest this individual. That was not the case at all. And again, I'm sorry for the family that is here in this room that has to hear this, and I never, ever in a million years expected that something like this would be conveyed.
The father that she used the expletives with authorized me tonight to tell that story. So that person can confirm everything that I just said.
Okay.
Excuse me?
Okay, go ahead.
That person had also been interviewed by 2 detectives and did not confirm the story that Mr. Opaque is talking about expletives being used. And again, I was hopeful, very hopeful, that we would not get into this type of questioning, because again, family members are here and it's a very hurtful memory.
Okay, thank you. District Attorney Holman, what type of action would you take against doctors that are not following Pennsylvania's protocol for prescribing legal opioids? For example, what if a dentist consistently offers 30-day supplies of OxyContin for wisdom teeth removal when only a few days worth are needed?
Sure. I was at a seminar recently in Tamaqua. The Tamaqua Chamber actually had Dr. Calabrese, who spoke open and honestly about the prescription monitoring program and the problem that, Pennsylvania is faced with physicians and overprescribing. Certainly those physicians would be charged if they were committing a crime. There has been some suggestions made in the medical field that pain management perhaps should be considered first. Pain management would be an alternative to overprescribing. If you're given a supply of 30 pills for a month, if you need those pills, and you then go back and you say you need additional pills, that doctor is not going to be able to give you those pills. It's just not going to happen. If they're doing it, it's illegal, and they're going to face the consequences. But I think a lot of this opiate addiction and the heroin addiction can be cut off at the knees, starting with the medical profession by offering individuals that alternative choice of pain management and going through a therapy, prescribing them something to do physically rather than just depend on pain medication.
Thank you. Attorney O'Peg, same question.
Thank you, Tom. Right now, I think the answer to that question is really a legislative issue. Right now, if a doctor is over-prescribing medication, that doctor has so much discretion as to how much they feel they need to prescribe. So if it's going to be classified as a crime, that is something for the legislature to do. Unfortunately, right now, the only thing we can go by are the programs being developed by the governor, setting forth certain guidelines as to how much someone can prescribe a legal opiate to someone for whatever pain they may have, and to manage that pain. But as the criminal statutes stand right now, you cannot charge a physician for overprescribing. If that becomes legislation and becomes a law, certainly that will be prosecuted fully and vigorously, because, as I indicated in my opening, in most instances, the remedy is worse than the disease. And if that doctor or whomever it may be, dentist, is prescribing more than they need to prescribe, that's creating the addictive problem that is a bane upon our society. And so if it comes to the point where there's a statute enacted to make it a crime, that will be fully enforced.
Just a little follow-up on that. If parents contacted your office and said, you know, we were just given a prescription for way more than we needed, if they contact your office, I know legally nothing could be done. Is there anything that perhaps your office could maybe write a letter just saying these are the protocols as a suggestion?
I think, you know, that certainly would be up to the discretion of the district attorney's office. The parents could also simply say they don't need all of that medication. They could walk down the hall and put the excess into the prescription take-back box. You know, as far as setting a principle for something like that to happen, I think that would have to be on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pace.
I think it can be done under the right approach. As I indicated earlier, one of the things I would do is I would convene a summit, and as part of that summit, I indicated that I would include physicians. So if I receive a call from a parent and they say that their child was overprescribed something by Dr. So-and-so, I could potentially send a letter to that doctor and say, we created a summit, we created a plan, we set forth a course of action as to how we're going to beat this opioid problem, and if you, Dr. So-and-so, are overprescribing medication, you're defeating our purpose. We would like for you to follow the guidelines that may have been established by the state. And the guidelines say for this ailment, you are supposed to have, whatever, 10 pills and not 30. So if it can be done within the realm of what we can put forth through the summit, then I think it can be done. We can't direct the doctor to do certain things, but we certainly can encourage him to do certain things.
Okay, Mr. Pape, this is for you. As DA, what can you do to persuade school county first responders to carry and administer Narcan? For example, I know of an ambulance company that will not carry Narcan. Is there anything that you could do as DA to force this issue?
As the district attorney, whether or not someone on the ambulance is going to carry Narcan would be discretionary with that ambulance personnel. Again, however, and I keep coming back to this because I think it's a great idea with the summit, is as part of that summit, we can bring that ambulance personnel in there that doesn't want to carry Narcan. We can bring them into our meeting. We can bring them into our summit. And we can give them statistics like Jason gave, where 4,000 people have been saved by the use of Narcan. We can make the situation a reality for them. If Narcan can save one life, then it's successful, and it should be done. I can't imagine under any circumstances where someone on the ambulance personnel would go to a scene and watch someone overdosing and dying in front of their eyes and not administer Narcan. So we need to educate. If someone doesn't want to carry Narcan with them, then we need to do a better job of educating them as to why they need to carry the Narcan.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Moylan, perhaps 2 years ago, had offered to utilize his facility, the Simon Kramer Institute, to store Narcan for various police officers, first responders, really anyone who would have the ability or would be out on a scene firsthand for a drug overdose. And his suggestion, I think, really catapulted into a lot of these individuals who may have been reluctant to carry the Narcan and to use it to do so. And Dr. Moylan, John Micah, Kathy Shuck, myself, as I mentioned, previously, we had looked at building a task force in dealing with this crisis, and that certainly would be at the forefront. The carrying of Narcan and, of course, using the Narcan. And I guess there's been, some perhaps negativity attached to it that, well, now that, addicts know that the Narcan works, it's a green light. But there's got to be a fine line. I don't know that anyone, any police officer or first responder who arrived at a scene and saw someone who was in the need would not bring them back by utilizing the Narcan. Dr. Moylan has offered, again, training on this very issue, the storage. He actually even offered to fund some of the purchases for the Narcan to keep on hand for Schuylkill County first responders and anyone who would need it. So I would, as the district attorney, continue moving forward and encouraging the use of Narcan with Dr. Moylan's help and with the task force help.
Thank you. Ms. Holman, this question, Schuylkill Drug Court. Can you tell us about some of the impressions that you've had with possible successes with the drug court, and if there were some issues, what you've learned that perhaps you could remedy?
Sure. Being involved from the beginning, I was able to review, as my job as the district attorney, to review the applications of the eligible participants or uneligible. And there were, say, 5 initially that had filled out applications and they were accepted. Those individuals then were reviewed by the adult probation office and they completed a risk and needs test. They were then reviewed also by the Drug and Alcohol Department to determine if they truly needed the program. Schuylkill County devised our drug treatment court to be for high risk, high need. But what I can tell you is that just in the short time that we started the program, I got to know personally all 35 applicants, participants. And each week, you became closer to that individual, hearing their story. hearing how they got into trouble, hearing what they were doing as far as a job, embarking on housing, struggling, writing essays and bringing that to the court's attention. Out of the 35 participants that we had, well, and still do have, it's a 14-month program. I suspect that the first graduate would be maybe mid-2018. We had 2 casualties. And when I say casualties, there are sanctions that we developed. And the sanctions were a gradual type of sanction, a verbal sanction. Perhaps then write an essay, get on the electronic monitor, and maybe then incarceration for a weekend. If we had an individual who went through that process of sanctions and still could not comply with the treatment program, they were terminated. And we did have 2 casualties. We had 2 individuals that were terminated, and unfortunately they are in state prison right now. But each and every one of the participants or the treatment team members, I think, were very satisfied with that decision after we had given them that many opportunities.
Thank you. Mr. O'Pig, same question. What are your thoughts on the recently initiated Schuylkill Drug Court?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I've been involved in the criminal justice system for most of my time that I've been practicing law. And I first looked at the drug court skeptically. I thought that defendants would simply look at it as an opportunity to avoid jail, which obviously is an unpleasant experience. But fortunately, when the Chief Public Defender for Schuylkill County was unavailable to make drug court, I substituted for him on a number of occasions. And I got to see firsthand how the system works. Judge Goodman runs the drug court. Judge Goodman is very good with dealing with each individual applicant and participant in his or her own manner. So he doesn't treat the group as a group. He treats each person individually. He listens to their concerns. He sets forth the program along with the team as to what needs to be done. He sets the parameters for whether or not they're going to go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. He sets the parameters for when someone messes up, if they have a missed urine, for example, because they have to take a urine test every week. He sets those parameters. He treats each individual individually, which is very important. And also, each participant has to write an essay each week about a different subject. So that forces them to take an introspective look at themselves and their own lives and what got them to the point that they're at now, standing in front of a judge, standing in front of other strangers, and telling other strangers and individuals why they're in this situation. It's a stigma that they don't want to have to deal with week in and week out, but they do it because they want to get better. So being part of the program enabled me to see that there are certain people that want to use this program to get better, not to avoid it.
Thank you.
I would like to respond to that because I think if Judge Goodman were here, he might disagree. 9 o'clock on Thursdays, we have what is called staffing. And the members of the drug court team make decisions together. It is not necessarily Judge Goodman who decides if someone is going from phase 1 to phase 2. It is a team decision. It's a staffing decision. And staffing discusses sanctions. Staffing discusses certain requests that are made. When you get into court, you have everything ironed out. There's really no surprises as far as what's going to come from Judge Goodman from the bench. So I think that's an important part for the public to know about the drug treatment court. There are many participants, and it's staffed weekly.
You want to respond?
He's the one that set up this program. He's the one that set up the guidelines. There is part of a team that meets on Thursday morning. They discuss all of their cases. They discuss the cases within the parameters of what the guidelines set forth. There are considerations taken in by all of the participants at that weekly meeting, and then ultimately, whether or not someone continues in the program, goes to the next level, is ultimately issued by Judge Goodman.
Okay. I know we started a little bit segments. They're kind of simple questions, if that's okay with you. Okay. I believe, Mr. O'Tate, it's your turn. Recovering addicts often complain about no transportation being available for them to work or for appointments since they lost their driver's licenses. What could the state or county do to resolve this issue?
Well, they could do a number of things. Recently, some cab companies have opened up throughout Schuylkill County. It could be possible for the county to apply for a grant or use the grant that has been recently given to them to get vouchers for these individuals, only to get from point A to point B, be it from home to a counseling session, be it from home to their job, whatever it may be. Unfortunately, in Schuylkill County, the bus system isn't the best. There might be one run in the morning to certain towns, and then another run later in the afternoon back to that same town, so someone doesn't have the opportunity to avail himself of public transportation. So we can use some of this money that has been given to us in a grant in order to get some type of voucher system, be it for a taxi or maybe even an Uber service or something of that nature.
Mrs. Holman?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that, Todd. During my time with the drug court, we would hear, unfortunately, excuses, people being late, couldn't get to court. Why? I got frustrated, so I had my staff put together a transportation manual. So we already have it, and we give it out to each drug court participant. It's got a little telephone on the front, and there are numbers throughout that booklet for the cab companies that do exist in Schuylkill County. There's an Uber, there's a bus schedule, there's a calendar on the back, and we have found that by giving that out, we have less excuses. We do also have some money now that will be available for bus vouchers. Actually, we had that previously with STS.
Thank you. Mrs. Holman, what are your thoughts on decriminalization of drug use and possessions? For example, in Europe, especially Amsterdam, they have decriminalized drug use, and there's been a dramatic drop in gang-related violence. Your opinion on that?
I don't think that overlooking someone with a small amount of possession should happen in Schuylkill County or in Pennsylvania for that matter. That to me just appears almost like, well, we're going to allow you to have a small amount of marijuana and smoke it. We won't cite you for that. So what happens the next time? I think it just builds up into a vicious cycle. I don't know that decriminalizing small amounts really is going to help us at all.
Okay, Mr. O'Tate?
Again, that's a legislative issue. Right now, it's not decriminalized. I do not support decriminalization of marijuana, small amount or not. However, I think one of the things that can be done is possession of a small amount of marijuana. The maximum term of imprisonment is 30 days in jail. Possession of drug paraphernalia, the maximum term of imprisonment is 1 year in jail. It's a misdemeanor to the third degree. Actually, it's an ungraded misdemeanor, so it's a misdemeanor to the third degree. So I think if, instead of crowding up the court system with people that are charged with possession of a small amount of marijuana or possession of drug paraphernalia, I think those are two crimes that can be handled at the magisterial level, rather than having it go to the magisterial level, having a preliminary hearing, coming up to court, and then putting a person on probation. I think that if there's a method that we can use to have those types of charges disposed of at the magisterial level, that's what needs to be done.
Okay, thank you. Kate, what is the most recent study, article, or book you've read on battling addiction?
I have not read a book in preparation for this evening's presentation, and I spoke to people from Tamaqua previously and Step Up to the Mic. I've read a number of articles on the internet dealing with the opioid addiction. One of the things I learned is that it has many facets to it. There are some people that blame the drug companies. There are some people that blame the physicians. There are some people, however, that say it's not a problem with the physicians. And if you keep trying to curtail the physician's ability to administer narcotics, opioids, things of that nature, then the people, instead of being able to get it legally from a physician, will turn to the streets, and they'll be buying those $5 bags of heroin. And then they'll be buying the heroin that's laced with fentanyl, and it'll result in drug deaths.
Thank you. Mrs. Holman?
Yes, I took the liberty of getting the United States Department of Justice Drug Enforcement Administration the 2017 National Drug Threat Assessment. A lot of material in here. Some of the aspects that I was quite taken with. Where most of the heroin is coming from, Mexico, the fentanyl that is in Pennsylvania, the effects that the drug problem has on healthcare, certainly the spike in all of the various crimes, retail thefts, burglaries, robberies, you name it. But this assessment manual, I would recommend for anyone who is looking to check out and see where we are nationally. Also some pamphlets on opiate and heroin abuse, keeping tabs on staying drug-free and helping others. That pamphlet was extremely useful, and also heroin and other opiates, keeping tabs on the drug epidemic. Many other pamphlets and treatises that I've used in preparation for tonight and in my work as the district attorney, and really keeping in touch with your children.
Thank you. Closing statements, Mr. Opaque.
Thank you, Todd. To close, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. Thank you for your attention. I think if nothing else has come out of this town hall meeting, is that the opioid crisis is not going away. The opioid crisis is very costly to the taxpayers in every municipality. There's payments that the county makes for health care, pharmaceutical care, other necessary services and programs on behalf of indigent and otherwise eligible individuals. There are costs associated with the criminal justice system. There are emergency services costs. There are other costs directly related to the opioid problem. How do we solve that cost problem? Well, one of the things that I've done is I've had some preliminary discussions with our county commissioners. And what I've done is I've had some conversations with a law firm in Pittsburgh that has filed a lawsuit in Beaver County against pharmaceutical companies because they are in the process of making misrepresentations and omissions about the appropriate uses and risks and safety of opioids. And those pharmaceutical companies, if held responsible, will be the ones paying the costs for the opioid epidemic. If that is filed in Schuylkill County, and if it is successful in Schuylkill County, the burden will no longer be on the taxpayers. The burden will be on the pharmaceutical companies. That has already begun. That process has begun in Schuylkill County, and hopefully it comes to fruition, because cost is a big factor in stopping this opioid problem. The opioid problem in Schuylkill County is real. The impacts associated with it can only be lessened. It's not going to go away. The impacts will be lessened only with a proactive, not a reactive district attorney, and that proactive district attorney is me. Thank you.
Please hold your applause. Please hold your applause to the end. Mrs. Holman.
Yes, I too received a letter from the Beaver County relative to a class action lawsuit. And yes, if the commissioners in Schuylkill County want us to move forward and we are able to do that, that'll be wonderful. However, in the interim, we as a community have to take the can-do approach and the need-to-do approach. Opioid abuse threatens more than individuals. It damages families, schools, workplaces, communities as a whole. Opioid abuse is a health problem and it is a safety problem. It is costing society, it is costing all of us billions of dollars every year. Treatment is imperative, but of course it is costly. Where do those monies come from? It comes from us, the taxpayers. Drug crimes represent at least 40% of the crimes committed in Schuylkill County. During my term in office, I can account for 11 drug raids with 221 arrests dealing with heroin and methamphetamine, deemed to be the other significant drug and the other drug that is upcoming. I have learned, as I have spoken with many other prosecutors throughout this Commonwealth, that we cannot arrest our way out of this problem. Education will lead to prevention. We as a community need to take charge. You, me, us, not the mystical they. We need to make a difference by making our community stronger through education, engagement, and outreach. Many in our area have faced tragedies in their families or amongst their friends due to issues of addiction. This is something we need to face and talk about. Some ideas that I'd like to implement in talking with the task force that I will be developing is after-school programs in every school. Having someone come in and talk to those children in those after-school programs about drug addiction. Have a time to talk event. This can also be handled through your own home. Education and panel discussions with experts. Too Good for Drugs. These are all programs that I plan on implementing. Safe alternative community actions and activities. Take back our parks. Do an outdoor movie night. Have a 5K and a fun run. There's endless possibilities as alternatives to addictions. We can do it together. And yes, I am also a proactive district attorney who has taken many initiatives in combating drugs, blight, and they go together. Thank you for your interest and thank you in advance for helping us work toward changing lives one individual at a time. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending. Please give a round of applause to both the candidates and the investigators.